Can I successfully sew swimwear on my sewing machine? Yes, I can, but it took a little bit to get there. Hi, my name is Sarah and my channel is knottygnome Crafts. My channel is all about sewing and styling a handmade wardrobe, and today we're going to talk about my very first experience ever of sewing swimwear. So just a little recap, I've been invited by my best friend to join her and her children in Florida for a few days at the first week of April, and I was very excited because I haven't gone anywhere in such a long time. And since we're going to be hanging out on the beach for a few days and I only owned one ready-to-wear swimsuit, I decided that I should go ahead and get a couple of more swimsuits, but rather than trying to purchase it and go through the agony of trying to find swimwear that fits me, I decided that I would try sewing my own. It's something that I've never been interested in sewing before, so I never thought I would sew my own swimsuits, but I thought, why not give it a try? What's the worst that could happen? So I got really excited about this and I placed an order right away at the Fabric Fairy. But while I was waiting for my fabric to come in the mail, I thought, why not try out a couple of practice swimsuits first, just so I can get the hang of how it goes and everything. So I drove to Joann's and I picked out a few fabrics from their selection. Now, because I've never thought about making swimwear before, I had no idea that Joann even sold swimwear fabric, but when I looked at their selection, they do have swimwear lining, they have power mesh. This time of year, they didn't really market anything as swimsuit fabric, but when I looked up online what kinds of fabrics I can use for swimwear, what I saw mostly suggested nylon spandex, and they said some of the websites also said you could use poly spandex, although I think the poly does not dry as quickly as the nylon. So I was able to find some fabrics from Joann that were under their activewear selection, and I'm excited to tell you about how things went. As far as other supplies, for this first attempt at sewing swimwear, I decided to keep it really simple, so I only wanted to use my sewing machine and I decided not to use my serger or cover stitch. So I just bought some Schmetz Stretch needles in the 70-10 size, because that's all that Joann's had as far as stretch needles goes. And then I also have a spool of 3/8 inch clear elastic that I bought from Wawak. And although I have seen swimwear elastic that's rubber and it looks more like a regular elastic but made of rubber, I don't have that, but the Wawak clear elastic was marketed as swimwear elastic, so I thought I would go ahead and use that, even though it's 3/8 of an inch wide, and both of the patterns that I chose called for 1/4 inch elastic. I decided to just try to make it work with what I had. So the first pattern that I bought for this experiment was the Helen's Closet Sandpiper swimsuit, which comes in sizes 0 to 34. And I made view A, which has the top with the shorter band and the high-rise bottoms. Now for sizing, because this was my very first time trying swimwear, I didn't want to get cute with the sizing. I just decided to pick the sizes that fit with my body measurements on the chart. So for the bottoms, it was very easy. I fit into the size 4, but for the top, I did grade between a 2 and a 4. I cut out a 2 at the upper shoulders area, and then I graded to a 4 at the under bust and did the 4 all the way down to the bottom of the swimsuit. And the reason that I did that was because my full bust fits the size 2, but my upper bust and my under bust both fit in a size 4, and I thought that my shoulders and my full bust that size usually agrees. They're generally the same size. So that's why I did that grading, and I will explain a little bit later how that turned out. Now let's talk about fabric. At Joann, I found an 80% nylon, 20% spandex in this absolutely gorgeous purple hollow cheetah print. It's just such a fun fabric. I loved it so much. And for the lining for this one, I just got a yard of their nude swimwear lining. I decided not to use power mesh, again, trying to keep it just as simple as I could for my first time out. So that was the fabric that I used for the sandpiper, and I did buy a yard of the cheetah and a yard of the lining. And when I was sewing this, I followed the instructions from Helen's Closet to the letter. I just did what the instructions said, I did it all on my sewing machine, and I ended up with something that looks like a swimsuit. So let's talk about the bottoms first. So they were very easy to put together. I'm really happy with how the sewing went. They do fit pretty well. I will say that the leg elastic feels a little bit tight and they're a little bit hard to get on, but once they're on, they feel comfortable. They're not digging in. I was pretty happy with the bottoms. They are really, really high rise. I mean, that is what I wanted, but they're definitely very high rise. And the bottom coverage is actually a little bit cheekier than I was expecting. And at first I felt uncomfortable, but after I wore it for a few minutes, I was like, this is fine, I can live with this. I think that the coverage on the bottom is maybe slightly skimpier than I would really want, but it's okay. So the top is where I ran into some issues. So just like the bottoms, I sewed it exactly as the directions said, but when I went to try it on, it was extremely tight and uncomfortable. The elastic was pulled so tightly that the neckline and the armholes were kind of both pushing up, so that the armholes were like digging in under my armpits, and it was just very, very uncomfortable. And I think part of the reason why that is might be due to my the elastic that I use, the clear elastic. I had a really hard time when I was sewing it, getting it to stretch out enough to fit with the fabric. Like, it was just very, very physically hard to stretch it out as much as it needed to be. And this is with cutting the elastic the same length as what the direction said. So I do wonder if perhaps my elastic was not quite as stretchy as like a traditional swimwear elastic. I'm really not sure because I've never used it before, but I did find that I just couldn't wear the top. It was just so tight and uncomfortable. And at first I was really bummed about it, and I was like, well, that didn't work out. But then I thought about it for a few days, and I decided that I could fix the swimsuit by simply removing the original elastic from the neckline and the armholes and cutting new elastic that was a little bit longer and putting it back in. So that's exactly what I did. And I used a formula to calculate what the size of the elastic that I would need, or the length of the elastic that I would need. And I actually got that formula from the next swimsuit pattern that I'm going to talk about. But basically, I measured the circumference of the armhole and then subtracted 10%. And then added seam allowance. And then I cut that out and put in the elastic again. It was quite a bit longer than what the Helen's Closet instructions said to use, but I'm really glad that I did that and took the extra time, because I did find that once I redid the elastic, I could wear the top. It is still slightly tight under the armholes, but it's not nearly as bad as it was. I can definitely wear this suit. And because of the armhole issue, I think that the next time that I make this swimsuit, I would simply cut out a straight size 4 on the top and the bottom, and I think that would solve my problems, in addition to changing up the elastic length like I just said. So I'm going to insert a clip of me wearing this swimsuit. I think that it's really cute. I like the style. I think that it suits my body shape really well. I'm really glad that I made the straight view A. I know that I've seen a lot of people online who made the longer band on the top from view B as well as the high-rise bottoms. And I think for me, probably because I'm so short, that would have been too much. Like, there would have been no skin in between the top and the bottom if I'd done that. So I'm really glad that I made the straight view A. And I think that it is a really cute and comfortable style, and I'm gonna love wearing it on the beach. So I forgot to mention that I bought the 2 patterns that I did because they are from pattern companies that I've used before. I have a level of trust in them, and I've seen quite a few versions on Instagram and YouTube. So I thought if other people were able to successfully sew these swimsuits, that I could too. So the second pattern that I purchased was the Friday Pattern Company Vernazza 2-piece swimsuit. This pattern comes in sizes extra small up to 4X, and it does not have layers, just so that you're aware. I know that a lot of the newer Friday Pattern Company patterns do have layers, but this one does not. For sizing on this, once again, I went with just directly how my body measurements corresponded to the chart. So I made a size extra small on the top and a size small on the bottom. So the fabric that I chose was an 80% poly, 20% spandex from Joann, and it has a black background. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this on camera or not, but this geometric pattern that's on the top is slightly iridescent, and it has a very, very subtle rainbow effect. And I think that it's really cool and just very subtle, and from far away it just looks like a classic black swimsuit, but I really do like the way this fabric looks. So I went ahead and bought it, even though it is poly rather than nylon. And once again, I bought 1 yard of the exterior fabric, and then I also bought 1 yard of black swimsuit lining. Now, I feel like I complain about this quite a lot, but I'm going to go ahead and complain about it again. This pattern comes with 5/8" seam allowances, even though it is a knit pattern. And I just don't like that. Number one, because it wastes fabric. And number two, because I just find it much more difficult to be accurate with my seam allowances when they're that wide. Now, the reason that I don't mind if woven patterns have 5/8 inch seam allowances is because that little extra is nice in case you need to make adjustments and let things out. But for a knit pattern, it's less likely that you're going to need to do that. So I just feel like it's wasteful. And I do think that this particular pattern gave me an issue with the accuracy. So I'll detail that more in just a moment. So starting with the bottoms, once again, I just did it exactly as the directions said. They went together very easily and smoothly, and I'm really happy with these bottoms. I will say that the fit of these is even nicer to me than the sandpipers. So they are still a high rise. They cover my belly button, but they're not quite as high rise as the sandpiper, which I actually like that a little bit better. And I also felt like the leg openings had a little bit more coverage, so I felt more comfortable. And I like these bottom patterns so much that I do think that for future swimwear that I make, if I do two pieces, I'm gonna just always use the Vernazza bottoms unless I find a pattern that just knocks my socks off that I have to try, because I do just really like the fit of these. They're very comfortable, and I'm very, very happy with how that turned out. If you're enjoying this video so far, I would love it if you'd give me a thumbs up because it helps more people find my channel. Thank you. Now, where I ran into problems with this swimsuit was actually on the top. I constructed it according to the directions, but when it came time to put the clear elastic on the lining piece, I marked my seam allowance with chalk, and then I tried to align the elastic on that seam line or very close to that seam line. But again, I think because the seam allowance is so wide, I just had a very difficult time keeping the elastic positioned where it was supposed to be. It kept wanting to shift as I was sewing. And so I don't think that that ended up as accurate as it could have been. And so as a result, especially around the straps, my swimsuit ended up kind of bubbly and not quite flat or neat. And this top is just it's not very well constructed. It looks very homemade to me. So I'm not really happy with how that turned out construction-wise. I do think that if I gave this another try, that I would be able to be a little bit more accurate with the top now that I know more the process and what I was doing wrong. But for now, I'm not really happy with how this particular top came out. It is very difficult to show you what it looks like because it's not on a body. And unfortunately, I will not be modeling this top for you because when I tried it on, it was way too small. Like, basically, I would be in danger of my nipple making an appearance because it was just so small. And I think what happened as far as the sizing goes and that being off, part of it was probably the seam allowance issue. I think that I might have been inaccurate and maybe taken too much of a seam allowance. And also, I think that the issue came into play where like my upper bust and my under bust are larger than my full bust, that I probably should have just sized up to the size small. And if I were to make this top again, I would make the size small. I do want to try it again at some point in the future. But for now, I decided that I was done with this particular top. The reason that I decided not to make another top was that I was going to go back to my black fabric and just cut another one and try it again in the size small. But I actually couldn't do that because I didn't have enough fabric left over. I had purchased 1 yard of the swimwear fabric, but because of that tie, the front of the bikini actually takes up more fabric than you would expect. So I just didn't have enough to recut it. But I did want to go ahead and finish this black swimsuit because the bottoms were perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with them. And if I just made myself a new top, I would have a functional swimsuit. So I had a little bit of an epiphany. Earlier this year, I sewed myself a sports bra using the Sew Your Happy Liz Bralette pattern. And I remembered that that pattern said that it could be worn as a bikini top. And also the thing that really stuck in my mind was that I was able to make it out of scraps. Like it took a very, very small, teeny tiny amount of fabric. So I went ahead and dug out that pattern, and I was able to cut it out from the scraps that I had left of the black fabric. So here is my Liz Bralette bikini top. And I did not follow the instructions on the Liz at all. All I did was I cut out the pattern and then I followed the directions as though I were sewing the sandpiper swimsuit. So basically I sewed the outer shell, I sewed the lining, Then I basted the edges together and treated it as one, and then I put the elastic on the wrong side and turned it and stitched. So very, very simple, straightforward. So I didn't need to do the burrito method or anything like that. So I'm really happy with how this came out. I think that it's very classic looking with the Liz Bralette and the Vernazza bottoms. I'm very, very happy to be wearing this on the beach. I think that it's a super cute basic swimsuit. And that was my experience of sewing my second one. So I'm so happy that I ended up with 2 wearable swimsuits out of my practice swimwear fabric, and I am going to take both of these on my trip. Now I did get my order from the Fabric Fairy, and I have some different plans for what I want to do with those. So if you want to see what I'm going to make with those fabrics and you want to see how beautiful they are, check out this video right here.